Chris, that's an interesting icon or whatever that is.
Hi, Brian. This is Michelle. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Michelle. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for your help.
Yep.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning. This morning.
All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. We'll call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the October minutes, which were sent out last week. Anybody had any questions or comments? If not, entertain a motion to approve the October minutes.
I move that we adopt the minutes from the October 28th, 2020 Retirement Commission meeting.
Second that.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes?
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so there are two main items on the agenda today. One is a follow-up discussion on the ESG investment strategy. There were three documents that went out related to this item in your packet. So one is sort of a summary that was based on some of the feedback that we've received over the last few meetings. The other, I worked a little bit with Scott, who was really helpful in providing some feedback. So there's sort of an alternate suggestion as well that's worded a little differently. And so just wanted to present both of those options just sort of as a starting place for our discussion today to see if we can get closer to making a decision in this area. So I think what I'll do is share my screen just so everyone can look at the same document, if that's all right.
That would be great.
And I will share this first. Okay. So are you all seeing the sustainable investment update?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is very similar to the document that we shared last week. I did make a few minor adjustments in some of the wording, and hopefully everybody had a chance to take a look at this. It's still primarily focused on the three managers in the large cap area specifically, and so this is a potential framework that could be approved, and then it also includes a sample motion that would focus on the three large cap managers just as a starting place, since they're sort of the easiest to implement a strategy if it were to be approved. The other document that was sent out was worded a little differently. It provided the commission with a little more flexibility in how they would implement this. So I would say that that's the main difference between the two, is that you might notice in one of these it says the commission shall, whereas in the other one it says the commission may at its discretion. And so there's some differences in that regard. So it just depends how strongly the commission would like to take a stand on this issue, and how much of a mandate you want to provide to our investment managers. So I don't know if anybody had any thoughts, comments, or questions to kind of get us started, but I guess I'll open it up for discussion, and it'd be great to just see where everybody is at this point, to see if we're ready to move forward with some sort of vote or not. And I'm happy to explain any of these bullet points in more detail, but I guess with that I'll open it up and see what people think.
Jason, did you watch or participate in that, I don't know what to call it, webinar a week or so ago?
I did, yeah.
I did too. And the first part of it I found particularly interesting and also a little compelling, because the two people who were, for those who didn't see it, it was on sustainable investing. And Celia Dallas and David Flood were the two who talked first. And they made a really strong case for why you would do this, almost to the point of why wouldn't you do this? Because of the returns. I mean, they're in the business of making money for their clients. So they're not really interested in doing something that doesn't enhance their ability to do that. And they have found ESG evaluation processes to be critical to actually enhancing their ability to deliver for their clients. They made a really strong case for it. And I don't know if you saw it the same way, Jason, but it spoke to me.
Yeah, I think one thing that's been interesting in this is just, that idea that, nobody is out there using ESG criteria as the only criteria that they're using to evaluate, what companies to invest in. They're sort of layering it on top of their fundamental analysis to the point where they view it as something that can only help, having more information as they're making decisions. And so, I think that there are, specifically when it comes to climate change and fossil fuels, that there certainly are non-financial factors that are going to play a big part in the coming decades, whether, obviously there are financial risks, but I think there are political and societal risks as well that ought to be considered. And I'm not sure that they are, currently being priced into the market. And I think, having our managers, a lot of them are already doing some version of this. And so, explicitly stating it in our investment policy as something that we believe and something that we think would enhance our returns for our beneficiaries, I think would only help us. But that's just my thoughts. So be interested to see what other people think as well.
From last week's meeting, the data that was provided, I guess, showed that, if we would have polio prior to, or whatever the case may have been, our rate of return would have been better. And y'all have to excuse my interest at home. But, if we're, for me, if we take the social and the political out of it, and, just looking at the purpose of the commission is to make sure that the fund is sustainable and, having the greatest return on our investment, that's what we're supposed to do. So it seems like the best option would to be to use the models and examples that have been provided and make the investments that are that make the fund the most money, to put it simply.
I'd agree with that. I don't see a downside to this, and I think we should just go ahead and do it.
Yeah, this first step seems like a relatively easy one because the data supports moving forward in this particular instance with the recommendations that may be below. I'm not sure. Can you scroll up a little bit? The bottom of the sample motion is falling off. There you go. So I guess predominantly we're talking about these three pieces of a motion that were pretty much covered in that matrix that we received back in September that explained where we were with each one of our managers and funds, and what actions could be taken without jeopardizing returns. And it seemed like just the contrary, that if we took these actions, we may enhance our returns.
You know, I read the two alternatives, or the first one and then the alternative, and I don't know how I feel about the shall versus may at discretion, but there's one word, this is going to sound stupid, but there's one word in the current ESG focus areas paragraph. The third line down, it's the last word, which is believes. And in the other one, that word becomes understands, which I think is better. And I would like to see that change to have it be understands, because I think that says something different than believes.
I would agree with that as well.
I'd like to make a motion right now to amend the climate change and fossil fuels companies paragraph based on that particular change, to change the word believes to understands in the third line of that paragraph. And again, this is just one word, but before we vote on the full motion, I think it's proper, if we're going to change one, change the wording before the full motion, I'd like to just make a motion right now to do that.
So if you're looking for a second, I'll provide that.
This word here.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so that motion has been seconded. Any other conversation about that motion? All in favor of modifying the document, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. All right, great.
I don't feel as strongly about the shall versus may, or that other stuff. I don't have a feeling about that. I don't know if anybody else does.
Al could probably give you a 30-minute diatribe about shall versus may. Or John.
I just also wanted to make one comment that, 1 year's returns, as we all know, doesn't make a portfolio, but it is very difficult to look at the market's action, the broader equity market's actions the past 2 years, but specifically in 2020. And you look at, I just saw, Tesla is up about 400% for the year and is about to become a component of the S&P 500 in December. You look at Exxon dropping out of the Dow for the first time since the 1920s. And again, while 1 year doesn't make a portfolio or a trend, I feel like this investment policy, it's not just a state, while it is a statement about our commitment to mitigating climate change, it is also good investment policy. I mean, I think it's just important to reiterate, when we look at the different trends and statistics currently in our equities markets right now, this makes complete sense. It does seem that consumers writ large are turning to alternative sources of energy. And again, a company like a Tesla shows that there is a demand for these types of equities that are sustainable, rather than the traditional fossil fuel extraction companies like Exxon.
There was a in the second part of that webinar a week or two ago, there was a really interesting guy. His name was Jeff Ubben. And I gathered that he invests fairly directly in companies. And he spent a long time talking about a particular company, the name of which I forgot, but I wrote down notes about what he said. And it was a company that, in essence, would have gone out of business had they not changed their business. They were involved with coal, and they did. They changed the nature of their business in a way that continues to make them successful. So and if you look at I hear loud and clear what you said about, a year or two, because you're right, it doesn't matter. But if you look at that little chart on the large cap index SSGA options, there's 5 years, and I don't know how far out their fossil fuel free index actually goes. It apparently doesn't go to 10 years, but across any time frame, it's fairly obvious that that version makes pretty good investment sense.
Yeah, I agree. Jason, at one point in one revision, I had put a definition in for fossil fuel company. Is that still in here?
There's one, it's very, very close. So the definition that you suggested was any business directly engaged in the mining, extracting, processing, distribution, and sale of fossil fuels. That's a much broader definition than what, as an example, this fossil fuel free index uses. And so it would be more restrictive than what's currently being proposed. I'll show you the definition that is used by SSGA in that index is defined as a company that owns proven and probable fuel reserves, which basically means that they're likely to be extracted. And so when they use that definition, they come up with these 15 names that they exclude from the S&P 500. If we used a definition more in line with kind of what you had suggested, that exclusion list would be a lot larger, I believe.
Yeah, I like this definition a lot better.
Okay.
And I'm glad we're putting a definition in.
Yeah. So.
And Jason, is that language from SSGA sort of an industry standard or something that you see across the board?
Yeah, if you just search proven and probable, there's a lot of information out there.
Okay.
And it's pretty common that that's used. It does depend on how restrictive you want to be, though. There certainly are funds out there that use more restrictive definitions. The temperature that I got and kind of have gotten from the commission is that this is sort of a first step, and so it might be prudent to take an action like this and see sort of how it plays out and what impact it has on our portfolio, and we could always come back and revise that as we move along. For example, as you get into mid cap or small cap, you might find that this definition doesn't do a whole lot for you as far as excluding names. And so we might need to revisit it at some point. But at this point, when we're just talking about the 3 large cap managers, this definition, does give you some substance to work with, and it will have an impact on the portfolio. And so my recommendation would be to start with something like this, and we can always revisit it in the future.
I guess I was interested in just making sure that our definition matched the world in which we invest, and we didn't have some definition that was completely decoupled or didn't fit very well. So thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, and my concern evolved around having a definition period. As we've talked before about making sure that people who don't injection mold petroleum-based plastics for necessary equipment don't get, cut off the list of possible companies to own. And this works perfectly, just like you said. It's much more general.
one other note that I wanted to make. So the investment policy statement, that section would be added to our investment policy, and we would work, over time to apply those to all our managers where we could. It immediately would impact the 3 large cap managers, which is detailed here, how we would do that. And so the way that would work out is Cornerstone has already indicated that there's one name in the portfolio, Chevron, that they would swap out. They would also sort of work to, if there was a name that they wanted to invest in that wasn't specifically one of those 15, but they felt like in the spirit of the, amendment that we've made here, they would work to exclude names that they felt sort of violated the spirit of the, policy as well, or at least check with us first before they made that move. Wells Capital, they currently don't have any of those names. Most of those names would fall sort of in the value investment arena instead of the growth arena, but they have had names in the past that would have applied. And so I think it only helps to add that restriction just to make it really clear for them what we're trying to do. And then the third one is the SSGA. That's probably the largest change because we would be changing investment products. We would be staying at SSGA, but moving out of the enhanced index and moving all of those funds into the fossil fuel free index instead. So it's the largest change, but it's not a difficult move to make, and it could be made relatively quickly. And so then over time, we would work with our other managers based on the adopted language and the policy statement to see what other changes might be made. But just to clarify which items are sort of immediately actionable versus things that we're going to have to continue to work on over time.
And Jason, what sort of time frame are we talking in terms of actually making these changes?
I think the Cornerstone change could be made within a week. Migrating the index, there would be some paperwork and subscription documents that we would have to sign, but certainly over the next 2 or 3 weeks, I think that could be wrapped up and the change could be made before the end of the year.
Right. Okay.
So what is the SSGA alternative for the emerging market index? Because it appears there's a somewhat larger percentage devoted to energy in that portfolio.
Yeah, that was, I think that was something that had gone out in some of the documents maybe a month or 2 ago. They do have a similar fossil fuel free index for emerging markets. So a certain percentage of our emerging markets exposure is with SSGA. It's in an index fund. There is a lot more exposure to that market in that fund as a percentage of the portfolio than there is in the S&P 500. And that was the one where they had mentioned, I think specifically that index is not open because they have not had enough investors who are interested in it, but the index is created. And there is an alternative investment that's actually an ETF that we could invest in that is sort of a retail facing instead of an institutional class. So we could, that's something that we would bring back because it's a much more involved decision. There are many more names. There are names that we haven't heard of because they're, international emerging market companies. And so it's out there and it is possible, but I think it would need a little more scrutiny before we made that decision.
Do you have any information on comparative return?
I can put that together. Yeah.
And is the Axiom Emerging Market Fund an actively managed fund as opposed to an index?
It is. It's actively managed, but they are actually already a PRI signatory, which is the Principles of Responsible Investing, and they already follow a lot of the ESG guidelines that are sort of internationally established. We could get more specific information from them about, how they do that and how they apply it to their portfolio. It doesn't mean that they don't have any fossil fuel exposure, but it does mean that they are incorporating ESG guidelines when they're making investment decisions. Mm-hmm. And they are actively managed. So we do have some flexibility there because they're managing a separate portfolio for us. But that's one of those things that as we work through this, we would specifically look at that fund and their approach.
Now, how closely do those two particular funds track in terms of performance?
I think that they're probably one of the ones that you would see a larger divergence in because they are actively managed. They have a very sort of a bottom-up approach where they're looking at specific companies and investing in those best companies. And I would think that they have a relatively strong divergence from the index because of that.
In a good way or a bad way?
There we go. Sorry.
Would that be a positive divergence?
It has been recently, yes. Yeah, they've done really well.
So an alternative could be just putting the emerging market eggs in that particular basket.
Yeah, that's true. For those who've been here for a while, you might remember when we first started investing in emerging markets, we had two active managers. One was Axiom, which sort of had a bottom up, they're sort of like a stock picker type manager. And the other was a company called Globista, which sort of looked at like macroeconomic trends. And, they were sort of like a top down, what do we think's happening generally? And then they would try to shift their portfolio based on that. And it just didn't work in the years that we had it. And so we switched them out and rotated into the SSGA index fund as the second manager. We picked two managers at the time because it was the first time that we had gotten into emerging markets, and we weren't sure which approach would be better suited for our portfolio. But there's no mandate that we have two managers. Many funds, many pension plans would only have one manager in that area. And so if we found one that we feel like we're really comfortable with and like their approach, there's no reason that we couldn't make that decision and just have one instead of two. So I want to make sure we leave time for the public safety disability discussion, but are there any other questions, or is there a motion that anyone would like to make at this time?
I'm really bad at making motions because of the formality of it, but I like this. And so I think adopting this would be a positive thing to do.
Would you be comfortable stating the sample motion for consideration?
Sure. You want me to read it?
Yeah.
So I move that the Retirement Commission for the City of Charlottesville take the following steps related to sustainable investing. First, request Cornerstone Investment Partners to exclude fossil fuel companies with proven and probable fuel reserves from the portfolio. Second, request Wells Capital to exclude fossil fuel companies with proven and probable fuel reserves from the portfolio. Third, migrate the SSGA Enhanced Large Cap Index to the SSGA S&P 500 Fossil Fuel Free Index. I further move that the Retirement Commission adopts the update to its investment policy statement as presented, with the one revision already adopted, and evaluates remaining investments for potential action in accordance with the plan's ESG focus areas.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Any opposed to the motion? Okay, the motion passes.
Nice work, Jason.
Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. You've become our subject matter expert on this and has been shepherding us through this for what, at least a year, maybe at least 18 months. So thank you for your time and effort.
Well, we'll keep working on it. All right, so the next item on the agenda is a discussion of the public safety retirement, the disability retirement. This is something that's come up a few times over the last year, and so there have been some questions from the commission just about what our policy is, what's in city code in regards to that benefit, and how it's administered. And so Lisa has actually sort of gone out and done a survey from other localities to provide some information and sort of get the conversation started. And so I will turn it over to her to get us started on this topic.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Can everybody hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So hopefully you got a chance to look over the attachments that I sent out, but I'll just review them quickly. So when I started this project, basically we just wanted to, sorry about that. We just wanted to kind of compare our process with disability retirement to some other localities in Virginia. What I did was I reached out to I reached out to 8, but only 7 talked to me. And then I also talked to VRS, which is the Virginia Retirement System, because they represent a lot of other localities in Virginia. And I compared how we do things to what they're all doing. And we have quite a few things in our code that we are allowed to do, but we're not necessarily doing. So we kind of wanted to see if we should tighten up what we're doing. So to kind of clarify what is disability retirement, it only affects public safety officers, so it doesn't affect all employees. And when a public safety officer gets injured in the line of duty, they would start off going on workers' comp. And then if it appeared that their disability was permanent, then they can apply for disability retirement, and then they would get an allowance basically for the rest of their life from the retirement fund. So the first thing that I asked all these other localities was, do they have an independent doctor examine each person who applies? So what we've been doing, as far as I know, is when a person gets injured, they go see their own doctor, and then their doctor would make a statement if they're permanently disabled or not. And it seemed that most of the other localities that I talked to did have a process in place to have an independent doctor examine the person who's injured. So there were 2 different ways that they did it. So some localities have basically a panel of medical doctors. And the reason you have to have several is because there are lots of different types of injuries. So you have to make sure that you have specialties in every area. And then this is all at the locality's expense. So not the person wouldn't pay to have an extra examination. And then let's see, VRS and another location, Norfolk, did it a different way. And they basically just hired an outside, they hire an outside contractor whenever someone gets injured. And then the outside contractor finds the doctor, makes the appointments, gets all the reports done, and presents it to the commission or their body that manages their retirement. So if we decided that we wanted to have an independent exam, then we would have to also decide how we wanted that exam to be handled.
Lisa?
Yes.
These independent contractors, they're in business. This is what they do. They're available resources that we could hire.
Yes. So I actually contacted both localities, gave me contact information for their outside contractors, and I reached out and they did send me information. So I kind of wanted today to keep it simple and general, but if you all would like to see that information, I'm happy to share it. And then I also checked, because right now we have a workers' comp panel. So we already have a list of doctors. It's not extensive, but that's something that we could start off using if we wanted to do it that way. Any questions so far? Okay.
That's great. Thanks.
Okay. So
could you,
yeah.
I'm sorry, could you provide those 2 companies to us or the information that you received from those?
Yes. I absolutely will. So then the next thing that I looked at was if the doctors say that the person is disabled, can we at some later date re-examine them to see if they've improved or if there's a possibility they could return to work. So we have that in our code that we can do that, but we just haven't, it's a possibility, but not something we've been pursuing. And I did find the majority have the same thing in their code. So some of them do it automatically for every single person. Most do it like they have their independent doctor examine the person. And then if that independent doctor says the person is disabled, but I recommend you review this again in a year or 2 years or 3 years, then they'll just follow the recommendation of that doctor. So that's something we can consider doing. Then the next thing that I talked to them about is, so basically how it works right now is that if a person is found to be disabled, because they cannot work for the police or the fire department, doesn't mean they can't at some future time change careers and get a different job and make a good living. And so we have it written into our code that we can find out what their earnings are and just make an adjustment. And how it works is we don't want them, if they make more than they could possibly earn as a officer, public safety officer, then we'll adjust their disability retirement allowance. So right now we're asking everyone who's on disability retirement to send us a W-2 every year. And if they don't have a W-2, they have to write a statement saying that they had no earnings. So what I found is that most of locations are just requiring a copy of the full tax return instead of just a W-2. And if we wanted to do that, we also have that ability to do that in our code. So we wouldn't have to change our code. We would just have to decide that's what we want to do. And then the final thing that I didn't start off looking for this, but it came up during all the conversations, is that right now, if someone gets denied, we don't have a clear appeal process in our code for that. So most of the locations do have an appeal process. So if we wanted to implement that, that would, all the other things I've talked about, we can do if we decide to, because we don't have to change our code to do it. But if we wanted to add an appeal process, then we probably have to do something about the code. And I did get some samples. So if at some later date you guys wanted to review that, I'm happy to provide them. Does anyone have any questions?
This is great information, Lisa.
Thank you.
Does a W-2 include a 1099?
No,
Yeah.
W-2 is just a W-2.
Right. So if we got their full tax returns, then we would see 1099.
Hey, question, did you notice if any of the other localities had a requirement in regards to years of service, or is it pretty much, you know, as soon as they start working, they could qualify for this benefit?
Pretty much.
Okay.
I think there's some good ideas here. I think the full tax return is a good idea. I mean, if you request a W-2, you may get a W-2, and that retiree may have 4 jobs, and 1 of 3 gets submitted, right? Tax returns would take care of that.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear that we're just taking up some of the procedures that we already have. And also, we're not trying to imply that anyone has done anything wrong, or we just think that in the interest of prudence, because we all have to manage this retirement fund, we want to make sure that we're handling things appropriately. But we don't want to try and make out like people are cheating or anything like that.
Right.
So granted, I'm the general employee representative, but the public safety guy here today, we talked, I looked over this a little bit, and for us at the fire department, we currently have a return to duty policy that we have to go through UVA WorkMed. They provide our annual physicals and things of that sort to determine if we're fit for duty or not. I know that there's the doctor's board that we currently have in place, but I don't know of anyone who's used that board. I'm not exactly sure what the police department and the sheriff's office have in place for similar practices. But we could potentially, if we wanted to put something in place, talk to WorkMed about their evaluation, seeing they're part of the UVA network, and what their opinion is, or if they had any experience in that.
That would be a good resource.
To perhaps use as an independent doctor examination. Yes.
Well, I guess it could be used as independent, seeing the panel. I would assume that they could talk to whatever physician in the UVA network for another evaluation. But specifically for, like I said, for the fire department, we use them for that return to duty status. If they make the determination that we're not fit for duty, we can't come back to work, and how that pertains to, say, a disability injury. If it gets to a point where they say, yeah, you can't come back to work, that probably could be used as the statement from within the department.
Then would we need to get a different independent examiner for the purposes of the retirement commission?
I think independent means independent and not contracted somehow with the department.
Did you say not contracted with the department?
Not contracted with the city department.
Okay.
Independent to me would be independent of the city.
Mm-hmm.
So the workers' comp panel or some other panel. And I'd support generally tightening it up with the tax returns as opposed to the W-2, especially if that doesn't include a 1099.
Yeah.
And adding at some point, I do think there has to be an appeals process.
Yeah, I was thinking of a scenario where our independent review says that somebody is not disabled, but their doctor is saying that they are. Like, how do you resolve that? I'm sure that, an individual might want to file an appeal. So that's a good point.
How do we feel about re-examinations?
I'd support it.
I think I would too. It seems prudent. We've talked about this before. Some of these retirement benefits, if someone's injured at a young enough age, get up into 7 figures over the course of a lifetime.
Sure. Yeah.
And again, I think I don't know who said it before, but I think it's also important to point out this is just part of the larger sort of effort at due diligence. Again, not implying anybody's been gaming the system or cheating or anything like that, but this is just part of an overall due diligence review of this policy.
And Lisa, which of these did you say we don't currently have codified?
The appeal process, everything
Okay.
else is in place. And I attached a copy of the code and I highlighted most of the stuff if you guys wanted to review it.
Was there anything else from perspective of public safety, or as far as things that we're not doing that maybe they think we ought to do, or is there a general comfort level with what's in the code already other than the appeals process?
Is Joe Hatter on the call today?
I think so.
Is he? I think he is actually the public safety representative.
Yeah, Franklin is too, aren't you? Or no?
No, I'm the I just happen to work for the fire department.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was actually surprised that there was not an appeals process. I've only been a part of, the commission for, we'll say, I guess maybe a year now. And I think we've had 3 or 4 claims come through that, just kind of walking in on them, I'm like, okay, this is a little overwhelming. But I don't think there's anything that we're not doing. I think there's just a lot to that that we have to look at and understand with the review of the condition, whatever it is. We have to be cautious with what we decide to do a review of, or have the person come back for a review, a health review of, because the traumatic injuries, you don't want somebody who's gone out on such a traumatic injury, you choose to have to come back and see a doctor in a year, 2 years to make sure that they're not, or to confirm that they're still quote unquote disabled. And then to understand that, the psychological effects of the person who lost their job because of, a simple injury. I don't know of anybody within the fire department that's gone out on a disability claim due to a worker's injury. I think most of the ones that we've seen come through have been, from other departments, but we just have to be cautious on the mental trauma that may cause to someone.
Lisa?
And along those lines, I did, in reading the definitions, a disability does include a mental illness or injury. And obviously, I think we as a city, but also society, have become more aware of things like PTSD and some of those sorts of things. And so I don't have a list of the doctor of the medical board in front of me, but do we have providers in that arena to do those independent evaluations as well? I just honestly don't know.
So the first thing I was going to say is that we could, based on what Markel said, is that if we had an independent medical examiner, we could ask that person, do you recommend we reevaluate? And if the injury is so obviously permanent, the examiner might say, no, you don't need to reevaluate, and then we wouldn't bother the person again. And secondly, the doctors from the workers' comp panel, I did not see any mental health doctors, so that's something we should probably add. If we're going to use that as a starting point.
Well, we have several kind of paths we could go down for our next steps. It seems like we need to do some investigation about independent doctor and what kind of services they could provide, like the mental health is discussed. The tax return versus W-2 needs to be settled, and it seems like, does it seem like it's a consensus here that an appeal process needs to be considered? So that looks like 3 pieces that need some more investigation. What's the best way to get there? Is this something that would require a subcommittee, or is it that much work, or no? Anybody have a sense? Lisa, you could maybe provide some guidance here, since you've already dug the shovel in a little ways.
Sure. So keep in mind I'm the new kid on the block, but so for the appeal process, I'm going to start with that. I do have several examples, but I think that would have to go through the city council. Am I?
That is correct. And I don't mean to interrupt, Ms. Birch, but I do know that I see Councilor Hill is not here today, and it might be a good idea for her, you know, for if we want to go that route, for commission staff to propose an ordinance amendment and have her kind of be here to receive that and get her feel for it before board with the entire commission. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
that's a good idea.
I'm happy to have that interruption. And then I'm not, as far as getting the W-2s versus the full tax return, if you want more information on that, I can dig around for some more. That seems like something that's already in our code. So if I was instructed to go forward with that, I think I could. And then the thing that probably does need more attention from the commission is the process for having an independent medical exam, because you would need to decide if you wanted us to have a panel of examiners, or you would need to decide if you wanted us to have an independent contractor doing it. And I think you all need some more information before you could make that decision. So I'm happy to provide more information, get whatever y'all need. I just need some instruction on that. And if you'd want to bring it up in a December meeting or another meeting next year, I'm happy to present more information later.
Yeah.
Lisa, this is Michelle. Excuse me. I would say that one thing we're not talking about and we want to consider is the reaction from the employees from public safety. You know, whether we choose to have a panel or contracted doctors, there are certain doctors that are very hard to get a hold of. I think that was mentioned earlier. For example, neuropsychologists and, you know, related to trauma in instances like that. I know we have UVA in the area, tremendous resource that makes us a little special, and that's a good resource we have. But also, again, we have to maintain trust with the employees. You know, if they say, well, the city's paying this provider to evaluate me to determine if I'm disabled, obviously they're going to fall in favor of the organization, not in the employee's favor. So I don't say that that's pessimistically and that that's going to be the automatic reaction. I think we need to be prepared for that. So maybe some more discussion with our employee representatives in public safety and even with the chiefs of public safety to help navigate through that employee response. What's your reaction or thoughts on that?
Boy, Michelle, that sounds like a very astute observation.
I was going to suggest, I mean, you can send us all the information. I don't think we should move forward with really anything without the public safety rep being included in the discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, just wanted to make sure that was on everyone's mind, that you know, we have to maintain that trust with employees. We don't want to appear that we are contracting or paying someone to say no to their disability. Having a panel, and this is just my opinion, having a panel of the same representatives over and over again might establish more of that trust. But that's just my opinion. But I definitely think you need to include the public safety chiefs, and maybe whether that's an invitation to the commission meeting or outside discussions, just like with council. I'm not sure how we navigate through that, but please include it. Thank you.
Lisa, I just have a question. I mean, this is so far outside of my frame of reference that this may be a stupid question, but what prompted this?
I'm not sure if I can answer, because there hasn't even been a claim since I've been employed with the city. I understood that it was something that came up months ago when there were several claims in a row, and I just understood that some members wanted us to look at this process and see if we could tighten it up.
This is Michelle again. Thank you for that, Lisa. We actually asked Lisa to gather this information based on what was said earlier. The past year, we've had about 3 claims from public safety. And each time during those discussions, it was, oh my gosh, are we stuck paying this? Oh my gosh, this is a huge amount. This could go on forever. You know, what can we change? How do we put some parameters around this thing? So we asked Lisa upon hire, and she did a tremendous job. Thank you for putting all of this together. This is very useful information. So you may recall over the past year when we have a disability claim in front of us, that's when we're having the discussion. You know, the other meetings, it doesn't come up as much. But these were all things that we have talked about over the past 12 months.
That's right.
I'm sort of an outside observer. I mean, truly, I'm not part of the government. This Article 6, to my eye, looks very comprehensive. I mean, somebody did some work with this. Not that it couldn't be better, but it looks like there's an awful lot that's already here.
Yeah, and I think part of the discussion is we're not utilizing everything that's in Article 6.
So this is Chrissy. Just as a staff observation, one recommendation I may make to the commission is that I think Michelle's points are well taken. It is, you know, sort of a trust issue. You know, it does get recognized as, oh my gosh, this is a change. But as a commission, I would encourage you to have the discussions. And since this is really more of a due diligence exercise as opposed to making material changes, that as a commission, you all take the recommendations that Lisa has put forward and decide as a commission what you think is the correct due diligence before going out to, we don't want to do due diligence based by committee. You know, if it's the right thing to do to, you know, have another review or an independent review, then as a commission, my recommendation would be that you decide that, and then you go to the chiefs and everyone else, and that's part of your message in order to build the trust. I don't think, you know, if this truly is due diligence, we don't need to ask permission to do the right thing, is my suggestion.
That's well said, Chrissy.
Thank you, Chrissy.
So again, Article 6 has everything except for the appeal process, where we would have to go back and ask permission to do that. Otherwise, we have the rights and responsibilities to use Article 6 as it's written.
I don't want to dilute the conversation. I'll just add something that hasn't come up yet. And then how would we treat people who are already on disability? I don't know if there's a way to make them go get exams now or provide different tax documents now. That may be a question for legal. And not that we have to address it right now, but I just wanted to keep it kind of in this bucket of this discussion.
That's a great question. And Sarah and I talked about this last week, and she pulled letters that have gone to people who have been approved. And in the letter, it does say that they may be required to undergo an annual medical examination. So not to say that we need to immediately go back and review everybody else who's already on it, but I think that they have been notified when they receive their letter approving them that they might have to undergo an exam, a later re-examination.
Thank you.
I just wanted to step in really quickly. One of the main reasons we started this discussion, and when Lisa was hired, asked her to dig in a little bit, is because we didn't want us, HR, to feel like we were overstepping what really should come from the commission. We've been asking for a W-2, but should it be a tax return? That's something that we wanted to just get guidance from before we did it. And the reevaluation, we've always told people that's a possibility and that we would contact them. But again, we need that to come from the commission, not from HR. So that prompted this as
Good
well.
point. Great point, Sarah. Thank you.
I guess going back to the W-2 idea, you know, I worked for years, a lot of them, and didn't get a W-2 ever. All my income was 1099 income, which I think is kind of prevalent. It's not universal, but it's not rare either. So I would want to see that added, and I guess the tax return does that.
Does the commission want to take any action on this at this meeting, or give it consideration and table it again, bring it forth again at a subsequent meeting?
I would suggest we table it right now, and I would suggest that when we consider it again, we ensure that the council rep is here to talk through the idea of having this ordinance amendment.
Yeah, and I would recommend that Mr. Hatter be here too.
Yes.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. Does anybody take exception to that?
One other thing, somebody said it, you know, with respect to people who are already collecting a disability allowance, and if changes were made, would those changes then apply to those people? And I sort of see that as potentially pulling the rug out from underneath somebody. You know, the rules were the rules, and that's how they got to where they are. And I just don't like retroactive changes.
Yeah, I hear you. I guess this is more of a John issue or question as to what part of section or Article 6 was in play and made known at the time that those people were awarded their disability retirement.
Another thing Lisa and I could send out is the letter of approval, that the template that people have received, so you can see what the people currently receiving the benefit have been told, because it has followed the code. Again, it's more of a question of tightening up our process. We've never followed up on the reevaluation, for example, but they've all been given exactly what the code spells out.
Yeah. So David, to your question about having the rug pulled out, it could feel that way to the recipient retiree, but they may also have been notified that it could happen, that you may have a re-examination, or you may have to show your earnings in a full tax return. So we'll talk about this in 2021.
Are we having a meeting next month?
I was going to ask that question. I would propose that maybe we skip the December meeting and plan on having our next meeting in January, unless anyone objects to that idea.
Crickets.
Okay, great.
I've got such a busy schedule these days.
All right, well, we'll plan on meeting again in January then, and picking this up at that point, if that sounds all right.
Super, sounds great. Again, Lisa and Sarah, everyone who worked on this, thank you very much.
Yeah, pretty interesting.
Great. Is there any other business? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Okay, a second?
Yep, second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great.
Aye.
All right, thank you all. We'll see you next year.
Take care and have a great holiday season.
Hey.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.